The island of Cuba was inhabited by various Native American cultures prior to the arrival of the explorer Christopher Columbus in 1492. After his arrival, Spain conquered Cuba and appointed Spanish governors to rule in Havana, which is the capital. The administrators in Cuba were subject to the Viceroy of New Spain and the local authorities in Hispaniola. In 1762-63, Havana was briefly occupied by Britain, before being returned to Spain in exchange for Florida. A series of rebellions between 1868 and 1898, led by General Maximo Gomez, failed to end Spanish rule and claimed the lives of 49,000 Cuban guerrillas and 126,000 Spanish soldiers. The Cubans did not like being under Spanish control, and they worked for it. They fought throughout the entirety of the 1800s. However, the Spanish-American War resulted in the Spanish withdrawal from the island in 1898 with the help of the United States. And following 3.5 years of subsequent U.S. military rule, Cuba gained formal independence in 1902. In the years following its independence, the Cuban Republic saw significant economic development, but also political corruption and a succession of despotic leaders, culminating in the overthrow of the dictator by the 26th of July movement led by Fidel Castro. You may have heard of him before. During the 1953 to 1959 Cuban Revolution, the new government aligned with the Soviet Union and embraced communism. In the early 1960s, Castro's regime withstood invasion, faced nuclear Armageddon, and experienced a civil war that included Dominican support for regime opponents. Following the Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, Castro publicly declared Cuba's support. His speech marked the start of Cuba's complete absorption into the Eastern Bloc with the Soviet Union. During the Cold War, Cuba also supported Soviet policy in Afghanistan, Poland, Angola, Ethiopia, Nicaragua, and El Salvador, and more, and the Cuban economy was mostly supported by Soviet subsidies. However, with the dissolution of the USSR in 1991, Cuba was plunged into a severe economic crisis known as the Special Period that ended in 2000, when Venezuela began providing Cuba with subsidized oil. The two countries are allies now. The country has been politically and economically isolated by the United States since the revolution, but has gradually gained access to foreign commerce and travel as efforts to normalize diplomatic relations have progressed. Domestic economic reforms are also beginning to tackle existing economic problems which arose in the aftermath of the Special Period. In modern times, Cuba has not changed too much from what I previously described, but they have been trying to restart relations with the United States and other past enemies, aka the West. Some countries have worked well, some not, but that is the end of the brief history of Cuba. Now for some fun facts. Fact number 1. Cuba boasts a near 100% literacy rate, one of the highest in the entire world, more than most Western countries like the United States and more. So second is the United States still owns a port on Cuban territory that a lot of people know of, which is from the early 1900s called Guantanamo Bay, to which there are now disputes with Cuba modern day regarding its presence and the lease agreement. This is something that is still creating tension between the two countries today. Third, Cuba and South Africa have had a proxy war in the 1900s. It was during the Angolan Civil War. Well, I don't know if it's technically a civil war, but it was between the Angolan communists and the non-communists soon after the Portuguese let them go. Cuba might seem like just one big island and a few smaller ones in the southwest, but Cuba is made up of just over 4,000 islands, which is a lot more than most people would expect. And finally, the Cuban island is not just made of Spanish or even British cities and whatnot. The first French settlement in Cuba was in 1819, and there's a town called Cienfuegos, which the French created and still exists to this day. Anyways, that is it for the brief history of the Cuban state.